All right. I wanted to, a couple things I wanted to go over this week was I wanted to finish up last week. We didn't cover everything I needed to. So if you, when you do your weekly reflection this week, you can draw from that stuff, that material. And then we're going to go over um, the stuff that we have for this week specifically. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk about the AI enhanced discovery project I just put up and show you everybody an example of what this looks like that somebody did. Now, the AI discovery project, again, I originally had outlined 6 different projects for people. You only have to do 4, and then you have to do the final capstone project. And a lot of people have turned in their proposals. Before you can do that project, we really need to get the proposals in. And I think most people have done that. So if you haven't yet, the proposal needs to be the emails back and forth as we talk about what you want to do for your project. That's what's important to that. Okay. And before we get to that, I wanted to share what this project is. And this project takes about an hour or so to do. And what it is, it's an exercise not in producing AI art. That is what you produce, but that's not the main uh, intent of this exercise. The main intent of this exercise is to use your ability to critique work from a specific movement or period, and then be able to develop a prompt to demonstrate your your skill at uh, applying critique. And I'm sorry, create an image that you then critique in relationship to what you assembled, and then uh, evaluate that and adjust it. So what you're demonstrating is your capacity to critique a work of art and identify the elements that make it something specific to a movement or a period. And that's what this exercise is about. And the tool that you're using to do this is AI image generating software. So this process is choose an art movement or period. And this for this class, it needs to be anything that's more recent than the year 1350. So some of the periods you can refer to are, for example, Baroque or Renaissance or Northern European Renaissance. Some of the movements are going to be, if you want to do realism, romanticism, cubism, or even any of the things that we talk about in the future. So you're going to choose one of those, and you're going to select 5 works that clearly represent its visual and conceptual value. So you're going to find 5 images that clearly represent the movement or period that you've chosen. And you need to be able to explain why each of those 5 examples is representative of that movement or period. I'm not giving you a forum to specifically critique each of them. You don't need to, but I want you to be able to explain why each of them are representative of what you selected. Notice that you need to be able to explain. Whether or not you directly explain, you need to be able to. So after you do that, after you have those 5 images, you're going to create a prompt for an AI image generator wherein you ask it to produce an original artwork in the style of your chosen movement or period. And in your prompt, you're going to include those 5 images so that the AI engine has something to refer to. It will, and you can use AI to help you generate the prompt as long as you're in control of the prompt, as long as you are guiding it to select those 5 images and create something specific as a result. After you create that first image, you're going to apply the 4 tools of artistic critique: describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. aiming for about 300 words if you're writing it down, or 3 minutes if you're making a video, spending about 75 words or 45 seconds for each of those 4 steps. So you've selected 5 images, you've created an AI image, and then you've critiqued the AI image. After doing that, you're going to look at your prompt, revise it with the intent of making the second image better than the first. And in this, you're going to write or record a short explanation, 100 words or 1 minute, describing why the second result is stronger or describing why it isn't stronger. Sometimes it will work better, sometimes it won't. I don't want you to keep tweaking the image until it's exactly what you want. You're just going to provide 2 images. And then you want to be able to describe how you collaborated with the AI tool that you selected during this whole process. Did you ask it for help in refining your prompt? Did it provide you like 3 or 4 images and you selected the best one out of those 3 or 4? How did you use it? And you're going to include observation about your process and how much input the AI had versus your own decision making. So what you submit is this. So this describes the process that you're going through. And what you submit is this actual thing. Your original prompt, the AI image, number 1, plus your critique of that image, your revised prompt, AI image number 2, your final evaluation, and then a brief reflection, 3 to 4 sentences on how you used AI for the assignment. So this is what you're submitting. Now, I want to, before we go on and look at all the other stuff, and I give you all the background for what tools you can use, I want to show you how this can look. Okay. So one of the students actually did this, and we're going to watch this really quick. Okay, here we go. Now the sound, her voice is really soft, so do your best to listen.
My AI enhanced art history project. I chose for my movement the prehistoric era, focusing on cave art from the Lascaux cave in France. Starting at this top left corner, we have a bear drawn in red ochre. Then we have busts of 4 horses that appear to be moving towards the left. They are drawn in black charcoal. Down below the bear, we have a herd of lionesses, mostly just lioness heads. We can see that they're looking towards the left in this image and also drawn in black charcoal. The middle image is of a bison. We can see that he's drawn in black charcoal and there are lacerations in the rock behind him. I don't know if that is like texture for the animal itself or if this was a drawing over these pre-existing marks. And then my last image is of a carving in rock wall of a horse. We can see there's a little bit more detail, kind of some movement here with this line through the body. So with this as my references, I moved forward with my first prompt to recreate some cave art. So my first prompt was, please generate a cave art drawing from 1.5 million years ago that is drawn in black charcoal on rock depicting Bigfoot. I chose Bigfoot just because I thought it would be kind of funny. In Ancient Aliens, they always reference old artworks talking about how this is proof of something mystical. So I felt like if such a thing were to exist, maybe we would have seen it in some ancient prehistoric rock art. So here we can see that there is a lot of detail right off the bat, whereas these really utilize the negative space of the rock and as well just the general shape of the animal. The only detail is in distinct features like the ears, the eyes, the face, the mouth. We can see that across the board. Like we have the ears, mane. So there's a lot more detail in this image. It's a lot more naturalistic. Um, Here I have caveman was trying too hard. I like the look of the rock in this image as it does look realistic compared to what I feel like a real rock wall would look like. Moving forward on my second prompt with that in mind, I made a little bit of a change here. So I kept the initial prompt that I wanted to please generate a prehistoric cave art drawing from 1.5 million years ago of Bigfoot drawn in black charcoal on a rock wall. I wanted there to be less detail and the image to be more weathered. I was looking to get that same stylized outline with the use of the negative space, a little bit more of an abstract drawing rather than the detailed one that we got here. Instead, for less detail, the image was filled in with black, which is representative of some prehistoric styles where you do see colored in solid figures, but this is not what I was going for. I do like the overall weathered look where it's more faded out, kind of smudged around the general silhouette of the body. And compared to this one where the lines are sharp, you can see the definition in the hairs of the arm. And the rock here, I'm not too big of a fan of. I feel like it kind of looks more like paper, or there's just not a lot of depth of color, I feel like, in this rock as there was in this one. But here I kind of realized the necessity for specifics when it comes to what I was looking for in my final product. In my reflection of this project, like I just previously said, I do realize the how specific I need to be in my wording and what I want the AI to create. Using words like the negative space, abstract, drawn on limestone, even on a cave wall, smeared effect. I feel like those detailed words probably would have given me the chance to create a image that more aligned with my reference photos. Um, but overall, I think it was pretty fun and I like what I came out with. I do prefer the first image, but I think the second one is probably a little bit more representative of what prehistoric cave art looks like, and what it may have looked like if Bigfoot appeared in those. So here are my sources, one for the images and one for ChatGPT, which I used to create these images. Thank you.
Some of the things that I really like about what Lindsay was doing is she found 5 images that were indicative of the period, of the styles of the period that she wanted to use. And then as she built the prompt and created that first image, she went back and compared it with what she saw. She saw that there were some things lacking, and she added onto that prompt so she could have an image that was more reflective, she thought, of the style. But through that video, you can see her referencing these, referencing the styles, referencing what the materials used, all that kind of stuff. So she's trying to be really careful. And she explains why this second image is better and what about it she doesn't like as much as the first image. She's very careful of that. And then at the end, we get a reflection, like what we talked about, where we're just how did you use AI and stuff like that. So in this example, I believe that it looks like to me that she ticked off all the boxes. She did everything that she needed to, and it's only a couple minutes long. But we see her original prompt. We see, including those 5 images she used as reference. We see the first AI image, and we hear her critique. We see her second prompt, and she explains even why she made the changes she did. We see the second AI generated image, and she evaluates that, why it's better, why it's worse. And then she gives her final evaluation of the whole thing and the whole process. And at the very end, she even writes down a brief reflection that we can see on the screen of how she used this assignment. So this is an excellent example. And I'm having a couple issues right now with accessing this video so everybody can see it. And I will add, as soon as she sends me the file for it, I will add that to the attendance thing so you can watch that as well. And yeah, as soon as I see that show up, um, I will put it in. So let's see. Hold on just a second. I'm going to see if it's already showed up. That would be awesome because then I can edit it right after I'm done. Okay, she hasn't sent me the file yet. As soon as she does, I will share it with everybody and I'll email everybody so that all of you can see her video as well. Now, as we use AI, Lindsay went to this website. This is on campus. And the reason why she was doing cave art is because it is for the 2710 class where it talks about prehistoric art. And she realized she did put in the wrong date. The date that she did should have been about 35 to 55,000 BC, and she went a little bit older than that. But this is where she found AI generating software. I do not want you to use anything other than free AI image generators. And there are some guidelines I really need you to follow. And they're talked about on this as well, but I clarify them right here. I want whatever tool you decide to use, I want you to make sure that it does not require your personal data or login for you to use. My daughter has worked with stuff like this before, and she got around that by making a fake email through, an additional email through Google that didn't have any of her personal information. You guys are students. I do not want you to feel like your information is compromised in any way. And so if whatever tool you're looking at requires that kind of stuff, move on to the next. I give you several different options. And the university is very clear. This university page, I'll link to that and I'll show you what it looks like really quick here. This is the Utah Tech University Artificial Intelligence page, and it gives you a list of approved AI models. And Microsoft Copilot Chat is what Lindsay used to generate that. And most of these do have a feature for input where you can put in those 5 images that you find, and that's what you need as you're getting ready to generate this. So, and this, it also gives you guidelines on how to use these as well. So definitely, if you go to this page, look at that and explore the different options. Lindsay said it took about 10 minutes to look at everything, and she ended up going with Copilot. So first, make sure that the tool does not require your personal data. Whenever possible, avoid using real names, university emails, and or especially identifying details. You do not want any of your identifying details on this. And all these AI image generators also have an option for you if you want to go in and say, no, I do not want you to use this for further research. Because all AI generators will keep a record of your interfacing with the AI machine. And they say that they're using that for future AI development. And that's true. That's what they're using it for. But they also, all of them have an opt-out option where you don't have to do that. You don't have to allow it to use any of your exercises that you're doing. And if you are having a hard time finding that opt-out, just go on YouTube and do a search with the AI engine's name, MageSpace, Crayon, Bing Image Creator, whatever, doesn't matter. Put in the name in YouTube and search for opt-out or how to opt out. And then it will give you the directions on how to do that. As soon as the image is generated, download it immediately or take a screenshot of it immediately, because most AI image generators, within anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, even though you can see the image on your screen, you'll no longer be able to download it. That the memory for that download is reassessed and sent somewhere else or used by something else. So as soon as it's generated, download it or take a screenshot right away. And do make sure that you consider digital privacy and think about what information it's collecting, whatever AI image generator you're using. A lot of the times, these companies that ask for your information, like your email and any demographic information about you, they make side income by providing that information to marketing companies. And as university students, that is not something that you should ever feel compelled to participate in. So that's why I'm really reiterating this stuff. So this is a phrase that I really like. Students may use any free, no login AI image generator, but must ensure compliance with its terms of use and privacy policy. So make sure that you understand what kinds of things you can do and stay within those parameters. So again, this is the page. The Utah Tech has several different options. And then these are some other ones that have no login options. Deep AI text to image. And none of these links are are clickable, but I'm going to change that in just a little bit here. You can copy them and paste them into a new search engine bar so that you can get right to websites. So Deep AI, Perchance AI, Flat AI, Magic Studio, Red Panda, Night Cafe, Playground, Bing Image Creator, Crayon, and MadeSpace. All of these are other ones that I found. So lots of different options. Just be careful. You're university students. You should not feel compelled to give your information to anybody to be able to use the tool. If the tool is asking you for information you don't feel comfortable sharing, move on to the next option or tool. Okay, so first click on this link, look at what the university has to offer. If none of those make you happy, find one of these. And again, the process is find 5 images that you feel define the movement or the period that you're looking at. Create a prompt, and you can use AI to help you with the prompt, but it has to be under your direction. And when you put it, include your 5 selected images. And you can ask it, in the prompt, you say, make sure that you watch out for these kind of lines, these kind of colors, stuff like that. That's what this is referencing, your reason for choosing those 5 images. And the first image, again, 3 minutes or 300 words, applying the tools of artistic critique. Then next thing you do is revise your prompt, update it, make a second image with 100 words or 1 minute referencing that second image, and describe how you collaborate with AI. And then at the end, you're going to do your final evaluation and a brief reflection, 3 to 4 sentences on how you used AI through this assignment. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. I will be sharing next week the first iteration of these that people turn in. I'll be sharing those. Notice that even though Lindsay talks about, yeah, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this to make it better, she only did 2 images, and that's all I want you to do. Now, several AI image generators will give you 2, 3, or 4 different options, and you'll pick one to work with. Those 2, 3, or 4 different options do not count as your first and second image. Your first image is going to be the one image you select from the options it gives you. You're going to update the prompt and then select one image from the options it gives you after that updated prompt. I hope that makes sense to everybody. All right. Now, I want to get back to a little bit of what we were talking about last week. I had a really good conversation today with somebody about some of their assignments as well as their proposal for their final project, capstone. You are responsible for 4 projects, the discovery or research projects. Then you're responsible for this 5th project, which should take about an hour, of the AI image generation. If you have a moral quandary about that and you don't want to do it, talk to me and we'll work through it. We'll find something else, but I want everybody to do that if they possibly can. So 4 real projects, the AI project, and last is your final capstone project. And the proposal for that should have been turned in on Sunday. If you haven't finished the proposal yet, I have responded to all the emails I've gotten. Just take care of that as soon as you can. And again, that proposal, that requires, let's see, I'm going to get to this and I'll share it with you. That proposal, final capstone project proposal, requires you to email me what you want to do. I respond to that email, and then you either respond back with updates and I respond back to you, or that whatever the exchange gets to the point where I say, great, go ahead, you're going to copy those emails all together, put that into a document, and that is what you submit for the full points for this. Our email exchange, not you saying, oh, this is what I want to do. That's not it. What we want to do is we've got to, for full points, you need to submit to me the entire email exchange. So I'm hoping that makes sense to people. All right, now going back to our regularly scheduled program. Last week we talked a little bit. Hopefully we saw that article or that video about Steve Martin describing abstract art. We talked about abstract. We talked about modern, postmodern, and contemporary. Abstract and non-objective. I really want you to watch this video to give you a better understanding of this. We did talk about this a little bit. Remember, I took you through what abstraction is, stylization, those kinds of things. The difference between abstract and non-objective is that non-objective is part of the larger abstract family. But most abstraction is a simplification of elements of the natural world. Putting those elements together, moving them around, making them into straight and horizontal and vertical lines, easier colors, things like that. Non-objective is where people create shapes, imagery, and colors that do not have a basis in the physical world. These are things like numbers and letters would fall under this. Raw emotion would fall under this. Just exploring the use of color for color's sake would fall under this. That's what non-objective is. And I wanted to share with you just a couple of these really quick before we go on. This is abstraction. Again, this is from last week's module. And I want to show you images of each of these artists really quick so you can kind of see what we're looking at for this kind of artwork. Paul Klee is one of my favorite watercolorists of all time. Most of the time, he does not have human figures. When he does, they're really weird looking. But one of the things you'll see is he has very simplified shapes, very simplified forms. A lot of the times, his watercolors will have these kind of geometric patterns and shapes in them, like this architecture, this kind of thing, or this big one. And even when he's doing figures, you can see there is a lot of geometry around it. And that's where Paul Klee is coming from. A lot of his stuff looks like that, like this. Let's see if we can find any more examples. Yeah, here's some other examples. So even this cat and bird, there's a lot of geometry going on, and you can see those kinds of forms. He will do some kind of things like this, some kind of shapes like that. But I think, I'm sorry about that. I wonder why my internet is acting funny all of a sudden. Okay, there we go. You can see the geometry. This one is more non-objective because it doesn't seem to have any figures in it. This is more abstract because this looks like that's a face, like a moon. We have drawing. This is definitely abstract because it looks like there's some shapes in there that are kind of vaguely based on the real world. This is non-objective. This is more abstract because these are architectural features. So hopefully you can see the difference there. And we're going to look at a sculptor's work next. This guy's name is Henry Moore. And he did a lot of his stuff. I hope you can see is very abstract because it is based on the human form. Let's see. So this is one of his sculptures. So in this, you can see here's a foot, a knee. Even though it's wildly distorted, the forms are simple. It can't be mistaken for a naturalistic image, but you can see that it is based on things from the real world. So this is a head. This is the model's torso with her arms coming down. This is analogous to the hip area. This shows some of his drawings. And these are some of his paintings, which I think look a lot more realistic, but still it's abstract because it is simplified. Hopefully you can see that. These are going to be more non-objective because the shapes are basically just squiggles. And I want to show some more of his sculptures. I clicked on the link. We're going to go and look at this. This is more non-objective. They're just shapes. They're large shapes. And these are more abstract because they are simplified based on real world things. You can tell this is a face with a nose and a mouth. This is like a distorted, simplified parent holding a child, a person, and this is very realistic. So that's Henry Moore kind of stuff. Then we move on from abstract to abstract expressionism. Wassily Kandinsky is one of my favorite artists. He's the guy that I mentioned who talks about an artist is a prophet. The two elements of a prophet are first, inward looking, and second, outward looking. And Wassily Kandinsky talks about the responsibility of the artist as prophet is that they look at and critique their own society. So they respond to the elements of their own society. And then the second aspect he talks about is that the artist also looks forward, projects ideas forward, projects ideas outside of the society to give people hope, to give people something to move forward to. And a lot of his stuff is going to be very much like this, which is non-objective, and it is non-objective abstraction. These are geometrical shapes. This one, I think, might almost be abstract because it almost looks to me like a person sitting down. But most of his stuff, he had synesthesia, so he would see colors of music. And a lot of his paintings are responding to music that he's heard. So here's a couple images, and the video that I show has a lot of stuff in it, a lot of more paintings. Lee Krasner is somebody who's very expressive. She was the wife of Jackson Pollock, and these are some examples of her work as well. And you can see that it is very different than any of the other people. And it is, a lot of it is going to be non-objective abstraction. And you can see a lot of different shapes and forms, a lot of black and gray. And this is Jackson Pollock. This is not Lee Krasner. And she wasn't invited a lot because she was a girl person. And for many of these movements, girl people were not allowed to participate as fully. And this shows a lot of other stuff. I'm hoping to see more images just of Lee Krasner's work. And we did see a little bit of hers, but not an awful lot. Okay, here is the black and white composition. It is abstract, but it is non-objective as well. It looks like the imagery that she's using is from letters for the most part and just random shapes. Then, of course, we look at one of the artists that make this movement. It's called Abstract Expressionism because it was supposed to be an embodiment of the emotions of the artist. It is an expression of what the artist is thinking. It isn't intended to be something that looks like it's abstracted from the natural world. Jackson Pollock, he's known for these spatter paintings because he explored layering and depth by using painting rather than making pictures that everybody could understand easily. And a lot of these were as big as the wall of a house. They were gigantic. They were huge. So these are a lot of his paintings. And you can see that a lot of them are just spatters, but they're designed to just explore the idea of depth and layering without necessarily needing a specific subject matter. And then some of my favorite artists are the minimalists. And one of my favorite of the minimalists is Barnett Newman. And when his painting shows up or pops up, I'll show it to you. So this is the kind of stuff that he did. He was very interested in the vertical line, in the presence of the vertical line. So he'd just do color fields next to each other. He was a very spiritual person, and a lot of his paintings deal with him exploring the moment of inspiration. So these vertical lines represent that point of contact between the individual and something outside of their ego, which he always envisioned as a vertical line. And a lot of them were called zip paintings, like this kind of a thing was a zip painting. And zip was this vertical line. And even in the more complicated stuff like this, you can see the very present vertical line. So for him, it was an exploration of the moment of inspiration. In a painting like this, he did not draw that vertical line, but it's still present as the joint between two intersecting fields. And you can see this, here's the vertical line right here. So it is abstract, but it's very non-objective. Morris Louis was also another very spiritual person. And what he loved is, as Barnett Newman is exploring the idea of that moment of inspiration, seeing it as a vertical line coming down from heaven. Morris Louis loved exploring the idea of connection with something outside of the physical world. And he always saw that there was a point of separation that he would visualize as veils. So these are his veil paintings. And he would make them, this would be the top, and he would pour stain or thin down paint over it, and then move the canvas slightly in different ways to get that paint or stain to flow in different ways. And it would when it would dry, he would do another layer. It was translucent, it would overlap, and then he would exhibit them upside down. So you'd have these diaphanous veils that just look really fantastic. Um, I think that they look amazing because he was using materials in a very different way than other people. But again, he is addressing spirituality with this idea of representing the separation between the physical world and the spiritual world with a veil. And that's what these veil paintings represented. Rothko was one of the artists who also at the same time was working with this. He was another spiritual person, and he was working with the idea of meditations. He wanted to create something that felt like a meditation, felt like an Eastern philosophy meditation. Now, all of these artists, about this time, at the end of World War II, the nuclear armaments are building up in the world. A lot of people are terrified. Kids in school were watching movies. You know, what if you see a bit bright flash on the horizon? What do you do? And that's where a lot of these paintings come from. People at this time, the artists at this time, were exploring different ways of meditating. Mark Rothko was very Buddhist, and then you look at some of these other painters, and Barnett Newman and Morris Louis had that kind of Buddhist mentality where it was minimalism, fading away from the world, trying to connect with the spiritual side of things by trying to be separate from all the distractions. And Jackson Pollock, this is more of a Hindu kind of meditation where you're creating stuff to distract the mind and get at the meditative spiritual state through distraction of ordinary thoughts. So two very different perspectives of getting to this a very similar place. And I thought Helen Frankenthaler did a really good job of combining a lot of these ideas, and where she was doing kind of both. In some of her paintings, like this one, you have the activity, but then you also have the calm. And a lot of her stuff was like that, where you have activity with large shapes. So you have both the activity and the calm, which I think is really fascinating. And you can see that with right here, this large abstract still life, where you have the calm and activity. And then some of these, you have the activity within a space of calm or openness, where maybe even the activity is large shapes. So this is a pretty large painting, but I think you can kind of see that blending of what she's doing. Really amazing stuff. So that I wanted to cover that so that we didn't miss out on it, and that was from last week. So if you want to uh, cover that in your weekly reflection for this week, that's fine. Now, with this new week, what we are talking about specifically is op art to digital art, transition from about 1960 closer to 1980. Now, the first digital image was actually produced in 1957, I believe, at Bell Labs, where a person was able to digitize a photograph of his daughter. And it was not used in digital photography. None of that stuff was really used very much until quite a bit later. I think it was the mid 70s when people started dealing with ideas of digital art. Now, the different kind of movements we're going to be looking at are they again these movements are happening really quickly, and so a lot of them overlap each other. We're going to be looking at op art, pop art, and several other elements like this. And this is a famous painting that I hope everybody remembers. It's Roy Lichtenstein's Wham, and it just looks like a non-contextualized image or panel from a comic strip from the newspaper. And what that is exactly what it is. But these are really large paintings that he would do. And I love this. This is a really good introduction to this whole time period. The theremin, I want you to listen to it a little bit, but I think it gives you a really good idea of the level of exploration that people are working with as they are experimenting with new materials, new ways of looking at the world, the permission to express themselves in a way that is not consistent with how everybody else sees the universe. We talked about that transition through Impressionism. And the theremin was actually an instrument that was invented to be a product of this new modern age. Let's see if we can. Oh, I'm sorry. I wonder why some of these links are not working. It is really frustrating to me, and I don't know why. Please double check that your links are working on this. And if anybody is having a problem, let me know right away so we can take care of it and I can get you good links. So I don't know if it's just my interface with the internet today or what's going on. So this is about 2 minutes long, and we're probably not going to listen to the whole thing. I just want you to hear this because this is kind of like the sound that goes along with this art that shifts from modern art to postmodern. Remember, the separation is about 1950, and the rationale behind it was modern art does still have internal context, it still has meaning, it still has content. Postmodern art is where people like Morris Lewis are showing process and working with materials just to demonstrate how pretty the materials are. And I think Morris Lewis he produced art right at this time in between those two, because even though his artwork were those veils that don't seem to have a lot of stuff going on other than just look how pretty the paint is when it flows down the canvas, he still did it specifically with content because they represented that veil that separated the spiritual from the physical world, at least in his mind. So let's listen to this and see what you think.
The theremin is an electronic musical instrument. It was invented in 1919 by a Russian physicist, Leon Theremin. Besides its unusual appearance, the theremin is also unique in that it's played without being touched. The theremin typically consists of a box with two metal antennas which create an electromagnetic field. The musician stands in front of the instrument and moves his hands in the proximity of the two antennas, which forms a capacitor between his hands and the antennas. The capacitance of the electromagnetic field varies by the distance between the player and the instrument. The upright antenna controls the pitch. When the right hand approaches the antenna, the pitch gets higher. When the hand moves away from it, the pitch gets lower again. Small, rapid movements of the right hand can create vibrato. The loop antenna controls the volume. Approaching the antenna makes the volume softer, so the left hand is responsible for dynamics and articulation. There is no physical contact with the instrument.
What I like about this, we're not going to watch any more of this. I do recommend watching the whole thing. What I like about that is just the way that this instrument looks and the way that it behaves, I think is a pretty good metaphor for the kind of art that we're looking at, where without any context, it doesn't make any sense. You need to apply context to it. And it also feels a little bit out of sync. The notes are not clearly registered. Like in a piano, each key will have a specific note registered to it. That's not the case in this. It is overall, the sound comes from overall movements. It comes from rapidity of movements, how close you are, how far away you are. And it has very little to do with anything like keyed scales or fretting or anything like that. And I think it's a really good metaphor for the world of what becomes modern art. I just think that that's really, and it's a really great example. Even though it was made in 1919, that kind of is about the time of Dada. And I think it fits really well with Dada because it looks ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't look like it makes any sense, but it does produce sound. Now, the different kinds of art, we're going to look at this. We are going to go through it a little bit rapidly, and I apologize for that. Please go through and look at the different examples of this. The art that we're looking at is op art, and this stands for, op is short for optics or optical. Pop art, pop is short for popular. Arte Povera, which is Italian for art of poverty. And minimalism. And we looked at a minimal abstract expressionist and Mark Rothko with those fields of color like this. But he's considered as to be one of the abstract expressionists because these are really large paintings that are designed to be meditations. I really definitely check this short video out, but I want to look at some of these artworks and show them to you as soon as the email or as soon as the image shows up. Okay. Now, this is a really great example of what op art is. At this time, post-World War II was the most powerful economic success in U.S. history, this period between the end of World War II and the very early 60s. At that time, if you worked on a road crew, or if you worked at a construction company, if you worked at a factory, most jobs like that would give you an income that was significant enough that you could afford to buy your family a home, which cost around the U.S. Homes cost an average of less than $8,000, and you could also buy yourself a car, which was just maybe a couple hundred to $1,000, and you could provide really well for your family. At least be comfortably living. And there was a less of a disparity between income and quality of life than in any other period in US history. And so artists, you don't have a lot of artists that are complaining about everything, but they are reacting to what's going on. And a big part of what's going on at this time is advertisers are exploding. They want access to all this income, the companies that employ the advertisers. And part of that was researching ways to attract people's attention. And I personally think this is anecdotal. I don't know what there is to verify it, but it seems like to me that kind of awareness in the visual landscape of the America at the time in Europe, artists were looking at a lot of stuff that was designed specifically to attract people's attention. And I think that's the environment that created op art. And again, op is short for optical. Notice the date of this, 1965. So we're at the tail end of that economic boom, and advertising is just absurd and ridiculous and everywhere. You have Route 66 filled with billboards and neon signs, you get all sorts of stuff going on to attract people's attention. Now, this is a flat canvas, but with an awareness of what advertisers are doing and an awareness of what eyes will do, artists start exploring the process of looking and the process of thinking about what we see. This is the content is here. It's not narrative. It doesn't tell a story. It's not rejecting anything. It's not promoting anything. It is just exploring the idea that what we see may look differently with the lines that we use and being aware of what the eye does as it sees something and how the brain processes information. So this is flat. It's on a flat canvas, but it looks 3D because the artist uses our visual expectations and plays with optical illusions. This is why it's called op art. I think that it's a really fascinating shape, and it feels like there's a tunnel under it here, and then here's a bulbous protrusion almost right here, just because Bridget Riley is experimenting and playing with our visual expectations with just varying widths of stripes. And there's some really interesting stuff going on with op art. So let me show you a couple other examples of op art. Definitely watch the video that I referenced there. And we'll look at some of the op artists as well. So here's Bridget's work. But you can see some of these things where I think all of us kind of played with this kind of stuff in our notebooks during boarding classes. But just with black and white stripes, we get some really interesting stuff going on. And this Arts Per magazine is really great. And I'll show you this. There's black and white stripes. It's all on a flat canvas, but the artist is experimenting with these ideas of how can they get you to react or relate to this canvas as if it's a three-dimensional space just by exploring ideas of widths of stripes. This is another really good example of op art, where the illusion of space and form is created just because they're playing with the ideas of visual expectation. Looks like there's 4 balls, and they're kind of growing out of a flat field of cubes. Victor Vasarely, I really like his stuff. What is frustrating to me sometimes is when you see one of his things printed with those on the hologram foil, where it's very reflective and stuff, you start turning it around and it can give you almost motion sickness because of how your eyes interpret it. It's very interesting. Richard Caldecott does a lot of stuff again with playing on these expectations of creating not just volumetric form on a flat space without any reference to real world items, but he also includes a lot of really interesting graphic shapes that hint at things like shadows of letters and stuff like that. I think it's fascinating. Stuff like this still makes me sick to my stomach. I don't know if any of you are old enough to have seen The Prisoner TV series. It is on YouTube. There's on a couple other places. Definitely watch it. All the sets and costumes were designed by French designers, and it uses a lot of this disorienting op art in it. Very interesting things. So some of the artists that it talks about is Bridget Riley. We already looked at some of her stuff, and Victor Vasarely. And then I believe that Richard Aneshkovitz was Eastern European. And his stuff does stuff very similar to these two, but he really enjoys playing with the ideas of color expectation. If I ask you which is closer, red or blue, 9 times out of 10, we don't really even think about it, but we do recognize that blue most often is farther away just because of atmospheric perspective. When you look across a long valley, on the far side, you have enough air in between you and the mountains that it turns those mountains, which could be red or green or brown or whatever, it starts turning them shades of blue. And what Richard Anushkovitz did a lot of the times is he played with those expectations and try to force things so that the red, even though it was you felt it was closer to you, would appear to be farther away, and the blue would be closer when our brains process things differently. He did a lot playing with color. And Morellet, excuse me, Francois really liked playing with very, very simple colors. And these designs were so popular that they went into wallpaper, specifically wallpaper for children's rooms and nurseries, and really interesting stuff. And Jesus Rafael Soto started doing stuff at this time, but as we've gotten closer to contemporary times, he and then his son started taking his shapes and using more up-to-date materials and doing some really interesting three-dimensional work with the stuff. So definitely check this video out as well. Now, going from op art, the other side of so op art arises from just the artist being aware of the kind of visual impact people like advertisers would have to attract eyeballs onto their work. Pop art is something kind of similar, but what pop art would do is present ordinary, trivial material as something potentially exciting or worth the gallery setting. And this is Andy Warhol's famous soup can. It is famous because he would do simple silk screens of ordinary products, but he'd do it in a setting so that they were formatted onto his canvas in the same way that, for example, medieval icons were, or Baroque portraits were done. And Andy Warhol would make these highfalutin portraits using banal materials. Silk screening was a really cheap way to make posters. And he would use incredibly ordinary objects like boxes of Brillo pads, cans of tomato soup, what everybody would see at the store all the time. And it was called pop art because it was designed specifically to use elements that were very popular, very common, and designed specifically to connect with ordinary people. Even though they'd be shown in these highfalutin galleries, it was designed very specifically to connect with ordinary people. And it's kind of the 20th century equivalent to the realism art that we saw in the mid 1800s, where the subject matter would be people gleaning in a field, people waiting for a ferry, ordinary folks doing ordinary things. The difference is the updated imagery. This is an ordinary Sunday comic strip. Everybody would see it every Sunday. Not a big deal at all, taken out of context, but it is displayed on a canvas that is about 6 to 8 feet tall and about 12 feet wide in a high-end museum. Specifically designed to tear down whatever ostensible barrier might exist in between the ordinary viewer and the quote-unquote high art. Roy Lichtenstein is a really good example of this. Watch this video. He would make abstracted shapes out of imagery that you might find like on wallpaper or a children's book. That's what he liked using. He also did a lot of abstraction. And again, the abstraction is simplifying the real world is what he worked with a lot of the times. He also incorporated elements of op art, which is optical illusion. Andy Warhol, this is a famous image because what he did is he took a photo of Marilyn Monroe from an advertising poster of her most popular movie at the time. He did color separation and created a series of silk screens that he would lay out. And the way that he formatted her face, he used principles of medieval iconography, particularly English iconography from the early 16th century, to format her face. So think about that for just a second. Yes, it is designed to appeal to the masses. It is designed to be the most commonly seen face in movie posters at the time. But by using these techniques of formatting, and it's very subtle. He never talked about it to anybody. He even denies it in a lot of his interviews. I happened to talk to uh, one of his assistants. Her name at the time was Ultraviolet. She was an adult film star that learned painting and stayed at his studio to paint with him and then create her own body of work. But I talked to her, and she said in their conversations, one of the things that he was trying to do is illustrate to everybody that we were elevating the common, ordinary items to a point where we were becoming spiritually subservient to them. And I just thought that that was really, really interesting. So there's a lot more going on than just uh, simple art. Even though that's what he would say in public interviews when he's talking to his own staff, it's a very different picture. I think it's fascinating. And Merritt Oppenheim, she did some very fascinating stuff, but what she loved doing is taking ordinary objects and covering them with the materials or making them out of materials that are completely inconsistent with their use. And the fur teacup is a famous example of this. And I'm just going to open up this video in another page. And I want you to see a picture of this. So this is an ordinary teacup that is covered with animal fur. And Merritt Oppenheim did a series of these. Again, it's pop art because she's taking popular objects, ordinary, banal objects, and she's elevating them somehow to art, either in its presentation and its setting or the purpose for doing it, purpose for presenting it. And this, she's taking a found teacup and a found saucer. When an artist talks about stuff that other people threw away that they're using in their own work, you call it found object art, just so that everybody knows you're hoity-toity and know what you're doing. And she's covering it with fur. But she did a whole series of these where she's taking ordinary objects, covering them with material that makes it incredibly impractical to use and not a little disturbing. So I think that is really, really fascinating. And she did a lot of this kind of stuff where she would take ordinary objects, cover them with something different, take them out of context, just to get you to engage with this and think about it. Like when you saw a spoon, if you see a spoon like this that's covered with fur in a museum, I believe it's antelope fur. Uh, some of the things you're going to ask yourself is first, okay, is this really what I'm looking at? Which is a spoon. So yes, it's a spoon. Well, can I use this? I can't use it if it's covered with fur. So what? How does your relationship with that object change when you realize you can no longer use it? And one of the fascinating things about Merritt Oppenheim is that she would specifically invite you to engage with thinking about objects that you use all the time without thinking about at all. And that's one thing that I really, really appreciate about her stuff. I don't know how many of you are old enough to have ever seen Yellow Submarine. It was a Beatles movie that is a cartoon. It was kind of earth-shatteringly disturbing to me as a kid, but I really enjoyed it. It's where you get these kind of surrealist images, but they're all done in a very high cartoon style, very stylized, abstracted quite a bit, feels a little bit uncomfortable, sometimes a lot uncomfortable, but it became very popular, particularly for psychedelic rock bands to have this kind of stuff on their cover. And it just, to be honest, now, even though I enjoyed it as a kid, now it kind of makes me nauseated a little bit when you see these kind of distorted shapes with really bright colors and stuff. It just makes me feel really unnerved quite a bit. But Peter Max was incredibly popular for quite a while in the 60s and 70s. And his style of art with the over the top expression of color really tied in to the psychedelic drug use culture at the time, because it seemed like it was a real world manifestation of an equivalent of the high that people were experiencing with these new drugs coming onto the market that people still didn't know how to handle. It wasn't, some of these were experimental enough that government agencies used them and doctors used them for processing, and a lot of people didn't realize how habit-forming and damaging they were. Keith Haring is one of my favorite artists of all time. He used these stick figures, and once you see that, you recognize, oh yeah, that's who that guy is. He's a stick figure dude. He was in the dawn of the AIDS epidemic, and he did not feel like he felt in, or he did not feel like he belonged, and so he wanted to make art of ordinary, simple, relatable figures that would make anybody feel like they could access it. And that's what he did. So he would, some of his images are emotionally very challenging, but most of it is just to engage you in a lighthearted conceptual conversation. And just reminding you that the world is still full of wonderful things, wonderment. And so I really like a lot of his work. But some of it, like I said, some of it becomes intensely personal and can be really emotionally draining and hard to deal with. So be careful of that. Now, this is happening in the UK and the US, pop art and op art. When we go to Italy, they kind of dealt with op art, or popular art in a little bit different way. Arte Povera is, instead of taking objects that everybody related to all the time, Arte Povera, you're dealing with post-World War II Italy, people are still recovering. A generation after World War II, people are still recovering. And a lot of it, and this was kind of like using, working with op art in the US, except all the materials are other people's garbage. And that's what these artists were generating, trying to create sculptures and art that makes you change your relationship with your concepts of ultimate poverty and having nothing and garbage. Just in an effort to get you to think about that. And there's some really interesting stuff. Now, I didn't tell you what to think, but the Arte Povera artists were trying to get you to think about it. So, stuff like this where it's stuff poured against the wall. Sometimes it would be lead, sometimes it would be other things. And a lot of the times the installations would be I'm sorry, this is a better image. Installations would be within high-end museums in Europe, but they would be taking garbage. This particular is shredded clothes taken out of a landfill, but separated out by color so that it becomes a study of color as opposed to just a celebration of garbage. And that's what a lot of the Arte Povera did, designing specifically ways to get you to think about garbage. So here we have this Roman-style bather sculpture looking out at a mound of people's cast-off clothing. This guy, Janis Kanellis, what he did is he would do things like fill up containers with garbage or detritus or rocks and then put them together. And again, this is something where this is postmodern because they're dealing with the materials, kind of concentrating on the materials, not so much the content. There's no narrative behind it. It's just to get you to think about the materials. Sometimes they would do it, he would do it specifically to get you to look at these interesting textures juxtaposed with each other. And that would be where the art lies. Sometimes he would do it specifically so you think about how much meaning to this material, or how much value is given to it when the context is shifted. When it's in a landfill, nobody cares about it. When it's in a museum, a 600-year-old museum that was populated with Renaissance paintings, how does that change your relationship to what is essentially other people's garbage? Really some fascinating stuff. And Mario Murr's doing some of the same kind of thing. Now, Michelangelo Pistoletto, I really like his work too, because he's doing things specifically where he's engaging human beings and asking them the question, how does your relationship as a human being change, or your value as a human being change when you're put into different settings and displayed in different ways? Sometimes you put like a mirror up where the people looking at it would be reflected, and that's what the art is. The process of reflection, the process of getting you to think about self-reflection. So really some interesting ideas going on. And then minimalism, I believe this is a piece by Yves Klein, which was a French artist who was the first artist to actually copyright a color. And this is Yves Klein blue. And what the minimalists did would be to parse down something to the point where there's only one element of it left, and that's what they would show. I'm sorry, I screwed that up. I hit the wrong button. I'm going to redo the page and see if I can find that again. No, I can't. I don't know. I screwed that up. Okay. I don't know why sometimes. I'm really hoping that our video has not died, because it looks like my internet is disconnecting. Colton, can you still hear me? Okay. I wonder what's going on with the internet yet then, because it's not allowing me to pull up the videos and things that I want to look at. Okay, so with minimalism, what the artists were trying, and you can see on this, if you can see this. Oh man, okay, it's not allowing me to. It's not even sharing what I'm trying to share. So let's do this again. Okay, it's not showing any of these artists. So I'm just going to describe them. When you get to, after this, I want you to look at the module and look at each of these artists. But the minimalists, like I'd say, would find one element or two, maybe three, that they would work. Okay, good. Some of it is coming back. Let's see if we can link to this then. Okay. Well, I wish I could blame my internet stuff on like the dogs attacking the lines or anything like that, but I can't. I think it's just neighborhood use. Okay, so that link, I want you guys to look at this. It's a short video. It's about 2.5 minutes long, but this is a really good example of minimalism where somebody would just make a canvas of a solid color. And in this, the difference between this and color field, or the simplified stuff that we're looking at with the abstract expressionists, is that there's no real variation or very little variation. And the motive behind doing the minimalism was it was also meditative, but it was designed to give you as little input as possible beyond the one thing or the very simple thing. And what's fascinating to me is that this is where you really start seeing post World War II interaction between, like, for example, Japan and the US. This is where the Japanese film industry starts really ramping up their monster movies that are modeled after 1950s era US monster movies. And they become like the world leader in that aspect. And people in the US are really starting to respond to worldviews of Asia and Southeast Asia. And I think that goes a little ways in explaining the attraction to a lot of these artists of things like minimalist art. For example, traditional samurai arts in Japan involve things like ikebana, which was flower arranging, where instead of making a big, beautiful bouquet, you would put several things in a vase and then take one item out at a time until you get the last item that actually still works in the vase. And this is an expression of simplifying life. And I think it's also a direct response to the pop art where you're extolling the virtues of ordinary objects, and the commercially driven life of the average American. And so there's some really interesting ideas going on, but you look at the art itself, and yeah, you get a black square with cracks on it. Who cares? The content itself does seem to be specifically lacking. There doesn't seem to be anything there to engage you intellectually. But consider that this is intended as a meditation, where it's designed to get you to think beyond the commercially driven world that publishers and advertisers want you to live in. So in this, it's minimal because you have a white ground with a black square on it, and there's a little bit of interest because the paint is designed to crackle and make this really interesting texture. But again, it's just like one or two elements, and that's it. Sometimes the elements would be these kinds of things. This is a forest of trees, but done with an abstracted minimalist perspective. We have a very, very simple shape that is as simple as you can get it. Very simple colors that are strong colors, but they are not intended to have nuance of interest to them. They're just monoliths of color, and that's it. There's a really good example of minimalism. And the comparison that Ed Guru makes, Art Ed Guru, that this gentleman makes is to a meditation garden from Japan, where you would have as simple elements as possible. This was another one of the samurai arts, where you would make a garden and pull everything away that you do not absolutely have to have in the garden, simplifying it down so you'd have a flat surface with a rock or two. And it is designed to help you with the Japanese style of Buddhist meditation, where you're stepping away from the rest of the world. So it is kind of a later reaction or revisiting of the earlier ideas of Mark Rothko and the color field painters. And I think it can be really interesting. And I think it is really interesting to a large part. If we go back, some of the other artists we look at is Frank Stella, do a lot of these paintings where it would be black lines with just a little bit of white in between them, and they'd be very large geometric shapes, very simple. All you would have is the white background with the black line. And it'd be enough of a black line that it almost seemed like the white was painted when it was actually the other way around. Dan Flavin worked a lot with light, and all he's doing is just demonstrating light in a space. So that's all it is, just having a blank room. The walls are most likely not going to be painted. That's going to be an aspect of the light that fills the room. And then he just has these very simple shapes right here. So, and this is just TITIT or TTT. So it's just basically a bunch of T's, but the lights that he used, so it's just basically one element in a room. And it's designed as a meditation to get you to think about stuff. Robert Morris did a little bit more with minimalism, where he would create these shapes that he would put flat and at angles and different things like that, so you could see the relationship between the shapes. But again, you see it's just this one element in an environment, and that's it. The element is not, there's not any decoration on it. It's all one flat color. Sometimes he would color different faces, different things, but that's rare. It's just one material is designed to get you, it is designed specifically so you interact with just one material, one shape. Again, it very Japanese style Buddhist meditation. Eva Hesse, I really like her work. I like her work because instead of making these monolithic simple forms, she looks at the natural world for her minimalist thing. So a lot of her things are going to look like cocoons, for example, or they're going to look like pupae casings, which I guess are the same thing, or they're going to look like stalactites, or they're going to look like sheets of paper, different stuff like that that have more of a relationship to the natural world as opposed to these other minimalist artists whose work really draws a lot on um, industrialized processes, industrialized materials. Like this looks very manufactured. This is very manufactured, of course, electronic lights. This kind of feels almost like a circuit board, not quite, but it just still has that kind of structured geometric feel that we equate with manufacturing. And then Eva Hess has it feels very cocoon-like. So she used a lot of fiberglass. She used a lot of resin, things that were industrial materials, but the way she used them, it feels like elements from the natural world, which I think are amazing. And Donald Judd, he would do things where he's taking aspects of what we expect and showing those aspects using very obviously manufactured materials. Like this is almost like a ladder, and the rungs of the ladder are actually horizontal bars clad in brass, and that's it. That's all it is. So it's one material, one object, one thing, and it just repeats. And that's what he does. And Donald Judd will create spaces to walk into that at the outset you're confused, what the heck is going on? But then when you realize that this is linked to that, Japanese Buddhist meditation, a lot of the times his displays start becoming calming because you're not expecting it to be any more than one object. You're not trying to find nuances of meaning. He is just displaying the object as it is. And that's it. There's no narrative, there's no underlying message other than that Buddhist meditation. And we only have a couple minutes left. I'm probably going to visit on this again next week. Conceptualism and feminist art. Conceptualism is something really interesting. What we've been looking at up to this point, so mid-60s, is people are exploring what materials do, and they're still making art out of materials. With conceptualism, the object of the art or the intention of the art shifts. Before, the artist is using tools like brushes, hammers, saws to create objects, like paintings, like sculptures. With conceptualism, the tools that are being used are those objects and sculptures that other people have made, and the art that is being made is the thoughts you have about it. So this artist, somebody else made the neon sign, but Joseph Kosuth put this neon sign, creating the word neon, in a darkened room, specifically because he is forcing a confrontation in your mind with the thoughts revolving around why, what's going on here, why the neon, why the word neon in a neon sign. He is basically playing with your mind, playing with your thoughts, and that's where the shift happens into conceptual art, because the sculpture, the final art piece, is what is going on inside your mind. And I want you to read this about Dada and think about that. Remember, Dada is just the art that just makes no sense because it's designed to force you to ask questions. What does art actually mean? What makes art? And I really like both of these videos. So we're going to, I want to stop there and get you to think about this a little bit, and we'll go over it again next week. So this is Clock 1 and 5 by Joseph Kosuth. And what we have here is a clock. This is an actual clock that tells the time. This is the photo of this clock at a different time. And then these are printed descriptions and definitions of aspects associated with the clock. Time, machination, because this is a machine, and object, because this is an object. So where's the real clock? Well, the first thing is right here. Obviously, this is the real clock, right? Well, from our perspective, this is still just a photo of a clock. So this is every bit as much of a real clock as this one. It's just removed once in one step. It's a photo of the clock, the original clock. So we are looking at a photo of a photo and a photo of a clock. And these are descriptions of the clock. Is that less real than the actual clock? Well, I think it's much less practical because they're just definitions. But Joseph Kosuth did a series of these where he's asking you to kind of talk to yourself about what is the hierarchy of practicality? What is the hierarchy of meaning? If you have a definition of a chair, a photo of a chair, and then an actual chair in front of you, which is the real chair? Well, obviously it's the physical chair, but is it? Because the photo of the chair, we still identify as a chair. And the description of the chair, or the definition of the chair, it has elements of that in it too. And so what is the thing that makes the chair a chair? And if we're looking at a photo of the exhibit where we see that, none of them are the actual chair. The only actual chair is the one we're using when we're looking at the photo. So by doing this, he's actually forcing you into a process of thinking, and that idea of engaging with concepts behind what you see is where the art of the conceptual art lies. Which I just think that is very fascinating. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to start right here for next week and look at these guys and hopefully get through several of them. So I want you to do that. Be aware of that. We'll look at just a few of them, but I want you to be aware of these guys because this is where art is really starting to shift. Up until this point, everything that we looked at was a physical object that could change hands. When we start getting into conceptual art, there is a physical object, but it's a byproduct of the art because the art is what you're thinking. And I think that is absolutely fascinating. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me this week. As soon as I get that video from the video file on that AI thing, I will put that into this week's attendance assignment. And if anybody has any questions about stuff that's going on or anything like that, we'll talk more about it next week and readdress this, finish off this module and deal with next week's module at the same time. So again, when you do your reflection, it can be on anything that we've covered. And if it doesn't seem like there's a direct connection of anything we covered, just put that in your introduction. So if you have any questions about stuff, just give me a call, an email. I talked to somebody this morning where we set up a Teams meeting and we were able to get all the questions and concerns answered. And whenever you get less than a perfect score, look at my comments, and you are always, up until a week after the end of the term, really, you can respond and resubmit. Just let me know what's going on. All righty. Thank you for joining me. And I look forward to seeing and talking to you guys next week. Have a good week and weekend, and we'll see you.